all video games are just a series of problems to be solved. It's just they put you in a room somewhere with whatever kind of obstacles, be they sort of enemies with guns or things that you have to surpass, and they just tell you, find the exit, find the next step. With a video games, or with a console or with a PC game, you sit there and you sort of click, but you're ultimately playing with somebody else's toys. But with tabletop gaming, in a lot of cases, it's something that people have. They've put these things together themselves. They've painted them themselves. They've constructed them themselves. It's a real sort of labour of love.
You're kind of pushed into playing certain people that you might not usually play. So it broadens your view on what the game is. You get to face different armies, different compositions of forces. You get to meet new people, which is the biggest thing about it. It's a social thing. And at the end of it, you can win something. So there's a big bonus there as well. You can get some shiny new toys for playing games. Can't really lose.
This is Tabletop Wargaming. It's battle as you've never seen it before. Players assemble, paint and collect model armies, then pit them against opponents in a dystopian futuristic battlefield. Often deemed as uncool on a social spectrum, this kind of hobby links directly to the likes of Dungeons and Dragons. But why are groups of middle-aged men playing with toy soldiers in the 21st century?
Play is what makes us open to new things. Play is what keeps our minds alive. Children who have a greater understanding of imagination are much more able to put ideas into the abstract. Adults who keep that sense of imagination, keep that sense of play, their minds maintain that malleability. They can continue to sort of look at big ideas in the abstract and try and make sense of them.
Tournaments aren't this scary thing that everyone thinks they are. They're competitive but friendly. There's a kind of belief that when you go to a tournament, you'll win at all costs, and it's all about winning. It's not. It's about having fun.
These tabletop tournaments take part throughout the year in specialist modelling shops. Think Airfix with attitude and whole libraries of fantasy literature behind it. But when considered in the rising age of video game consoles and the billions that are spent developing them every year, this humble hobby seems modest at best. After all, it's essentially just plastic, paint and multitudes of many-sided dice.
We have all of this cutting-edge technology, and we're using it to be deliberately unsophisticated. And the reason for that is that it's much more subjective. It's much more in the hands of individuals. There is always something that is challenging you.
We come from Middlesbrough, down here for these competitions. But yeah, we come to these tournaments. Good right people. Where we live, it's not a very big community for this type of game. It's all other games, but you get to meet different people and we travel all over. We go to Nottingham, we're looking at some round Newcastle, Sunderland way, this like that. So good right people. Yeah, people you wouldn't expect to play.
Competition, yeah, they're good. Helps you to fight different armies. The local club I go to, there's only one or two people play it, so it's always the same battles all the time.
Video games now, so console games, are much more story driven, whereas tabletop gaming, sure, you can judge the figures that people make and you can judge them as sort of intricate little pieces of art, but the stories that they're being used to play out, the battles that they're being used to enact, are going to change again at the whim of the person in the driver's seat. So it's very hard to judge something like that critically.
Here at the Outpost, in the depths of Sheffield's Fargate, 5 tumultuous battles are taking place. But down on the ground floor, it's still just a modelling shop. Here, Chris and his team run painting tutorials and model swaps to help veteran players and new recruits alike best build their armies. Whether you fight with Dark Eldar, a race of alien space pirates, or command the mighty Necrons, lifeless steel skeletal soldiers, the modelling process is pretty much the same. Plastic and metal pieces are separated, filed, glued and painted to make small figurines with incredible detail. Chris's cabinets are always full of patrons' models, competition trophies and champion figurines, but the industry will never compare to sitting in a dark room in front of a large, high-res TV, the infamous world of video games.
All video games, just like a lot of entertainment, are a form of escapism, but I think particularly with tabletop gaming, there's a kind of omnipotence there. There's that idea of being an armchair general pushing around these sort of armies of hundreds of thousands of people. It's the same sort of psychology behind The Sims, people love the idea of being omnipotent, and people love the idea of bending figures, bending characters to their whim, I think.
They're one of the biggest ways to keep the social aspect running. That's for sure. It keeps people interested, competitive play, but it's got a reputation as being tough now. Some of the events that we run have some ridiculous prestige attached to them in the community.
It's not a passive medium. It's not. It is inherently interactive, and whether that's deciding on tactics in a tabletop game and pushing people around the board to flank your enemy, or figuring out how to get through a puzzle on something like Portal.
The likes of Games Workshop and Warhammer are names known to few and understood by even fewer. Tabletop wargaming involves strategy, basic mathematics and hand-eye coordination, while on the flip side it's a micro-detailed form of art, where some painters choose not to play in tournaments at all. There is certainly a dedicated following of this recreation of man's oldest hobby, the art of making war.
It's simple, they're just getting bigger and more popular. We're seeing a lot of tournament venues popping up at the moment, a hell of a lot, and they seem to just be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's just, come play tournaments. They're brilliant. They're the best part of the game for me.
Not every brain is identical, but there's something very simplistic about that, but very, very pleasing. People like stuff that's sort of clean and simple. And I think that that's why fads in the video game industry will sort of have their peaks and their troughs, but that's why stuff like the tabletop communities, Warhammer and Dungeons and Dragons, will continue on quite comfortably for years.
There's a certain versatility to the hobby as a whole. With shops come battlefields like the Outpost in the process of expansion, there's no question that miniature modelling is still thriving under the hood. New youth recruitment will continue as children walk past these shop windows and see the excitement inside. It seems the art of war will continue for the better.